All right. Okay, how we doing here? 702. Yeah, I don't know how many people are going to show up, so I might let me take a quick look at the participant list. Oh, come on, joined six. Show me the six. Oh gosh, this little window. Got it. All right. John, Mark, the other Mark, Bill, Dudley. All right. How are we doing? It's 7:03. Yeah, maybe we'll just start moving along here. Okay. So this one was just to kind of expose those who haven't really experienced the Seabreeze phenomenon at Wyndham to kind of some pretty basic observations and a little bit of background. If Lee were here, he would probably add a lot to this. I think he's got some other videos. Lee has actually ridden along this Seabreeze front quite a lot and flown at quite some distance. Um, so basically, just as background, a convergence is two air masses coming together, which is also the definition of a front. The Seabreeze
We
front
need to sweep on those last three in the moment.
is basically all the inland heating and rising air creates a local low pressure, and it brings in the coastal cool air, which has not been compelled to rise. And the direction of these arrows and some of these features will become a little bit more important in a minute. But basically, cool, moist air that's stable and doesn't really like to provide a lot of thermals gets pulled into our nice warm, drier land mass. And generally, the front runs parallel to the shoreline. I'll show you a little bit of that. So this is a picture I took from I-95 commuting, 95 in a stretch like an old Saybrook that's running west to east. And what's interesting about the convergence of two air masses is this weird little step change in the cloud is a key indicator that there's a drier air mass on the left of that step and a wetter air mass on the right. And they're actually colliding. And because they have nowhere to go when they're colliding, they're both forced upward at the boundary. And this is a perfect cloud example of the boundary. Now, the step changes because the moisture air condenses at a lower altitude as it gets pushed upward than the drier air. So basically, the idea is to stay on the dry side of the front. And if you look at the right, um, there's kind of a dead zone of wind in that collision area. And then the sea breeze is coming in from the right with the blue arrows. And then there's generally this whole convergence works best when there is a northwest wind, a little drier, more unstable air mass. Um, and we've seen the strongest convergences when that is actually like a reasonable, like a cold frontal passage the day before or something. And then this sort of detail becomes a little more important when you try to fly along this in terms of expecting where lift and sink will be. And everything in the blue is kind of like unhappiness. Generally, there's a little bit of residual lift near the cloud bases. Air's kind of stable. But the insidious thing is the boundary is curved. It does not run vertically. So you can kind of be under the sweet spot in that little notch that's in the drier portion of the boundary. And if you get a little bit low, you might fall into this region. And what's even more insidious, and I'll show you this later in videos and stuff too, um, these downward curtain things kind of mark the unpleasant boundary where things are changing fast. And you can see one of these clouds, but it can be a little bit stale, a little bit old, and then you'll see other wisps of curtains forming in the drier air mass. So suddenly you'll realize, oh crap, I'm behind the real boundary, and I've been looking at an old cloud. So that's a very dynamic situation. And then the last thing I was going to say is that In general, our Seabreeze front is quite weak. Um, some convergences you can kind of fly into the direction of the page here, kind of like parallel and under this or in this boundary region, and you can just fly 100 miles without having to turn. In my experience with the convergence in our area, the Seabreeze convergence is it kicks off a lot of thermals, um, but there's often gaps between the clouds that are kind of like zero sync or maybe 50 feet down instead of your glider's normal, a couple hundred feet down. So it's not like a magic bullet. Although I have a feeling Lee has had some experiences where he's had stronger convergence. So I'll show you two videos or videos from two different flights. One where I flew with Lee recently, and one or a couple years prior to that where there was a weak sea breeze front right over Wyndham, and I just sort of played around in it and tried to see how the features stacked up with the books. And this I stole imagery out of G. Dale's Soaring Engine Volume 2. So this is all copyrighted material, so I'm gonna get arrested. But anyway, the thing with like the red areas, G. Dale claims that there's you get some upward movement in these red areas, and you'll see that there's some low crap and some what are called curtain clouds that are still kind of providing some lift. So in my videos, you'll see I actually circle these, I play there to see are they really going up, and we'll see how that goes. So those things are called curtain clouds. It's the kind of dangly nastiness that don't really look like cumulus. And then this zone is where the air masses are generally being forced upward. And again, there's like the wedge of the sea breeze air marine layer just coming in, and it's kind of crappy at an angle. So right under that overhang is great, but even away from it in the dry direction is generally a favorable place to search. So I've kind of moved around this whole area. The sea breeze basically moves from south to north. That's the other thing I'll show you in a minute. But um, the other thing here is like, okay, here's a picture of a different flight. Nice uniform. Cumulus cloud, the one in the top right here, kind of raggedy, like, oh, is that kind of a convergence thing? But it's not, they all have kind of the same cloud base altitude. And this happens to be just like a cloud street day. Um, the glider's pointed toward a cloud street that kind of runs near left to far right. So it's kind of going into the page kind of at an angle. And those are pleasant. You just drive under those and get consistent lift. This, however, was it's actually, I think it might be the same snapshot as the little cover photo, but so what do you see here? You see weird stuff. You see cumulus that aren't really well formed. You see little bits at higher than normal altitude. You see some consistent cloud base, kind of like on one side. Then over the right, you see kind of like more chaos. So I'm kind of looking in this picture, kind of looking into the long axis of the front as poorly formed as it is. And generally these fronts are kind of poorly formed, and you have to keep an eye out for where it really is relative to where the slightly older clouds are telling you it is. Um, so this past August, Lee and I chased each other around a little bit in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and I want to show you the satellite top view of that to show you where the front is and how it moved and what it left behind. Um, and then some video of me approaching it from the distance early in the day, and then kind of like some key things to give you a clue that you're looking at some kind of front, or in this case, obvious sea breeze. 3 years prior to that, I was much less experienced, and I was musing on a flight, making some recordings, and there were more classic looking convergent features. It was weak. And then I drove down the front under the step change of the cloud, thinking I was where I needed to be. And then you can see that there are low wisps forming on the farther toward the dry direction. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the curtain clouds they're kind of wet air being dragged upward somewhat and condensing. And G. Dale showed that there could be some lift. So I actually drove around in circles and stuff on those and wanted to see how they were. So let's see, I'm going to open up something now. 2025.
We're not seeing it though.
Yep,
There it is. Okay.
all right, actually, so this is a real he's ahead of me in this you can't see him, but I'm driving due south from Wyndham. I happen to be over the Thames River, and we know from like SkySight is pretty good at predicting Seabreeze convergence, and Lee and I both kind of noticed it. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go down and do one of my favorite things, which is to go play in it." So there's kind of a haphazard line in the distance of clouds. It's not super great, um, but I'll show you it. Let's see. Video more and wait. But kind of like solid clouds there.
Kind of losing the audio, Bill. I don't know if anybody else is losing it. Kind of choppy.
Oh, okay.
Me?
Losing my audio or losing the video audio? Oh, yeah, I lost it too. Hang on.
Can you mute the video unless you're saying
Yeah,
stuff? Oh,
I
you there.
can. I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's see microphone. Yeah, it's the first time I have tried noise removal default. Let me get rid of the noise removal default. Let's see if that helps. Sorry, guys. Give me a sec. Noise removal default personalized. All right. Yeah, so what I can do is it's just yeah. So how are you? Can you hear me now? It looks like my microphone icon is moving. Is
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay, good. All right, so I'm just going to scan the that line of clouds, and you see some lower stuff there. I don't know if you're seeing my mouse, but lower stuff there. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, so these are scraggly. There's a big altitude change in some of these clouds, and then here's some more like curtainy stuff there. So that's the first clue that that we're headed towards something that is a little different than a cloud street. So then, so this is now I've turned 90 degrees left once I reached that line, and you can see over on the right there's some stuff a little bit lower. And actually, I'm going to turn on the audio so you can hear the vario. So I'm contending right now that the dry side is not making a ton of clouds. I think it's still fairly dry. And this you can kind of like see an arc here where it goes down to a lower cloud base a little bit. It's not like a massive step change, and this is a weak convergence, but I'm flying on the north edge of all this activity, and I'm just kind of like more or less going up at maybe, I don't know, 150, 200 feet a minute. And I'm just driving kind of in the direction, along this boundary of kind of slightly disorganized clouds. So let me let's just see. Whoops, I just wanted to make sure that you could hear that I'm not even under a cloud and there's sort of very So in general, so in general, our convergence is kind of weak so that it feels thermally, it feels a little convergency, but like on this particular day, even with this weak convergence, Seabreeze, we could more or less run in the direction of Providence, and everything was kind of going up gently, and then you'd hit a thermal, it was going up, strong, and then you'd go back to like zero sync or 100 feet up. And again, the other clue is if you look on the right side, you see like the lower moisture side of this convergence. So this particular day, the takeaway here is like, okay, not perfectly formed cumulus with nice round puffy tops, ice cream cone tops. Um, Kind of weird cumulus, different sizes, kind of making a poorly formed line west to east, and then some signs of a lower altitude, wetter side of this whole thing. So you just kind of like, so all of this lift is kind of hundreds of yards wide at times. Other times it'll be right under like the shelf. And then the whole time, and I think even on this flight, I've got a clip of it, Lee on the radio saying, don't get fooled, keep looking north because you might be looking at an old cloud and suddenly you're behind and you've got no lift and you're on the wet side and you don't realize it. So I've got a better example of that coming up soon. So this is me just running a little longer in the direction of east northeast. Kind of kind of feels like a cloud street in a way, but it's kind of a weak front that has more consistent upward moving air. So let's pause this. Okay, so this is the same flight, and the region I was just showing you is probably this. I'm in the blue, Lee's in red. Um, Lee got down there earlier than me, you'll see in a second. But it's low resolution satellite, but the white puffies here are actually the early sea breeze front. And the thing, one notable thing here, and I'll show you this in another video at the very end here. There's a green hole here with no clouds. This is already marine layer that's kind of pushed in almost as far as Gallup Hill Farm here. Um, and we can watch that slowly push north. And in fact, the second day of flight video I'm going to show you, it had already pushed like into the Wyndham area. So generally, the sea breeze almost always originates right at the shoreline and it migrates north. And in this case, I think it's fairly early in the day, but and Lee and I just Lee, wants to make a beeline for it and see how well it's working. So this is where we ended up going, and you can see, and the satellite updates every, I don't know, few minutes, so you can see like that. It'll be more obvious in a second when I flip to the next video. But here now, he and I are now in the Seabreeze front area, and he's kind of just going back and forth and exploring it. And then I do for a few minutes, but then I head north on this flight for other reasons. But so it's almost like on a weak sea breeze front day like this, you don't always get a nice line of clouds, but you can see it becoming a little more visible in that area. So if we flash forward to later in the day, this is hours later, we're probably 3 hours later at least. This whole area has the wet side of the convergence, or the moist stable side of it, has overrun this area, and there's just really no lift. anymore. And but these are still like there's cloud streets kind of remaining. Um, so there is a frontal boundary. It's just not quite as obvious anymore, but at least you can see where the marine air has moved in. So like on a very strong sea breeze day, if you do a flight down to the south and you get trapped behind this, you could be landing out. So you can see how the late in the day things are just kind of petering out to the south because the marine layer has just kind of crushed it. We go to, so now, let me pause. So here's another flight 3 years earlier where Lee went north. I wasn't really a courageous cross-country guy yet. Um, but I took off and I'm like, oh wow, there's a front already like right over us. You can and back where my cursor is, you can see a big step change in the cloud base. It's quite prominent, and this boundary will be very classic in many ways. It's another sort of weak convergence day. I ended up flying almost 4 hours just literally right in the Wyndham area, just playing around with this stuff. And this video is when I first, it's a minute long, it's a minute and a half long. It's
All right.
when I first noticed that, oh geez, I'm flying right in the vicinity of a Seabreeze convergence right over Wyndham.
So that convergence appears to be already over Wyndham. It's already moved to the north of Wyndham. You can see it's like a 2,000 foot or 1,000 foot change in cloud base right there. Classic step change. So just for fun here, it's like there's multiple cloud. Like look at the base. I'm under something that's probably, well, I guess maybe it's some out of the shelf, but so no way am I going to go to the north because I probably won't make it back. So I think all I might do today is sort of play in this convergence.
So I wasn't really correct there when I said if I go to the north, I won't make it back. But I was actually concerned because I didn't really know much about sea breeze fronts, that this front could move north so far and so fast that if I went to say, I don't know, Southbridge or something, and I wasn't even venturing that far at this point. I was only a year into soaring with my own glider, but that I would like get like I'd end up trying to come back and I'd end up in sinky moist air and not have a good final glide back to Wyndham. But that's not quite true. There was still plenty of activity up north, and this front didn't really move over a number of hours.
And get a feel for it. It's kind of interesting, pretty dramatic. I suppose if I really wanted to go land at an airport to the north, I could do that and deal with the retrieve, but I'm not sure I'm up for that today. Back up at 5,000 or 49, and just kind of hang around and fool around with this convergence.
So later in that, later in this flight, I basically decided I'm going to drive the glider right to where I think the convergence is, and you can see, like right now, I think I'm pointed like I'm going to say, judging by the like east northeast maybe, and you can see that I've got low clouds to my right, and I'm thinking this region right in front of me should be convergence that I want to see if there's consistent rising air to just and and how good is this thing? Could I just keep going indefinitely or because in the books it'll say like there might be a line of lift that just goes on for a long time, and others will be like, no, it's a disturbance that will kick off a ton of thermals, and don't get behind it, but treat it more like a cloud street or a series of thermals with gaps.
Okay, so I'm up at 6 now, still near Wyndham, I'm just sort of playing with the front here, trying to get a sense of whether it's a bunch of little thermals, whether this convergence actually is a thing. And there's no cloud above me right here. Cloud base gets lower to my right. I'm going northeast. Thing was supposed to come in from the southeast, which kind of makes sense. It kind of looks the way it's aligned here. Let's see if there's anything in front of this thing. Six miles north of London. Northeast of London. A lot of sink. A lot of sink. Now let's just see. If I go over to this, if I go.
So basically, I'm paralleling what I think is like the convergence line, but I'm probably hundreds of yards to a half mile too far on the dry side. And there's no, there's just like thermals and some sink, from the thermals and nothing terribly unusual. So I decided to turn back and get really close to those downward, dropping features and see what that's like.
Over to this stuff on the right. Right up. Now the question is,
931, what about that street to our right running north?
oh, with the wind.
It's okay. 2 or 3,000 feet higher than the west of the center. Well, that is true. We close to that on? Are you up?
I think I can continue my turn. I'm trying to get.
One of those clouds, let's see if I can get up to that 3,000 foot. Okay.
I think I'm trying to get to this feature here, like get right in front of these low clouds and drive kind of like off in this direction, because it kind of looks like the front is kind of going off to the right. Yeah, because if you see off to the right, it's kind of consistent higher cloud base, and then there's this interface with this crazy crappy stuff. So to me, like right now, it looks like, oh, look at this nice. This is the frontal boundary here. It's got to be in this region. So I'm kind of happily, like at this point, there's no sign that I'm already kind of behind the front. But like, take a look at this little wispy here all of a sudden, and how quickly that grows and becomes more obvious.
I would say it's not a winner in terms of lift. But I don't know.
Romeo Charlie for Romeo Hotel Romeo. Yeah, go ahead, Romeo Hotel Romeo. Steve, where are you guys? We're not. North of Claremont at this point.
Maybe this is sort of a light convergence lift right in front of this mess.
See, there's another little wispy here building. So I'm already like I'm on the wet side of this boundary, and there's not a lot of consistent energy there. No surprise, but it wasn't even obvious to me.
It's Jaffrey heading north.
Finally, it's on.
Now, see, now I'm behind the curtain. Feels like I gotta get ahead of this.
Clear.
Plenty of sink here.
Even though there's a nice, perfectly formed boundary right here, that's not really where it is anymore. It's probably already hundreds of yards, if not a quarter mile or something northbound of that.
A lot of sink.
Red eyes over there. Wind down. 8,000.
So at this point, I decide to turn left, which is toward the wet air. So let's see what happens. So to me, it's like I'm not quite sure really how strong this Seabreeze front is, whether I'm in the right spot or not, but I found a little bit of lift and I'm just circling. But um, clearly, that's a lot of times these convergences are kind of, you just got to feel your way through them and make best use of them. Oh, my audio died too.
Shit.
All right, so later on in the same flight, I've just decided I'm going to explore some of these curtain clouds and see if they're actually creating lift like G. Dale's book claimed.
With the traffic, glider Whiskey Quebec to the left downwind for 27 with it.
Look at that wisp, how fast that wisp formed. Wow.
So in this case, I'm actually experiencing lift in these curtains, which are apparently moist air getting dragged upward at the interface. Um, I wasn't in the prior video, but yeah, so it's kind of hit or miss, and you can actually see these form in real time when you're this close to them.
With the traffic, glider on left downwind for 27 with it.
Excuse me. Pretty wild.
Yeah, so there's been like great lift all right along this boundary. So maybe this is the real boundary, but I think I'm kind of pointing in the long direction of the front, and I got lower clouds on the right, lower clouds on the left, and I'm kind of going up. So, at this point, I'm just kind of shaking my head, going, okay, I guess, there's lift here, but I wouldn't have expected if there was, lower clouds to my right, there would really be, but maybe just these tendrils can be counted on for lift once in a while if you're in a pinch.
With the traffic, Cherokee to the right of Quebec.
So not all of these wisps are going up. I'm sinking a lot. So either that's rising or I'm sinking.
Yeah, you can actually see how fast the glider is sinking right now.
With the traffic,
find
glider
out.
on base to final 27.
Wow,
If the
600
Cherokee
feet
could wait,
down.
please. I will wait.
Jeez. Massive sink.
With traffic, glider turning final 27.
I think here, to be honest with you, I just wanted to go between these clouds, however illegal it may be. It just was so pretty.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Gosh. So dynamic.
Right. So then the last thing I wanted to show you was same day I just flew south, clearly to the I'm to the south of Wyndham now, just setting up for a landing, and you can just see a whole world of difference, right? Clear air, you can kind of see haze, somewhat at my altitude off in the distance, so it's a stable air mass, none of the and you can even hear the way the glider behaves is just, in very, very calm air.
Wyndham traffic, glider Yankee Sierra on a 45 to left downwind 27 Wyndham.
So that's me just looking up at the sort of residue of that front, and that was the area I just left. And you can see just how, like, I mean, these are not well separated, puffy clouds, It's kind of a ragged collection, which is the remnants of the front. I turned the camera back towards the shoreline again to show you how, like, I'm looking kind of like northeast now. Everything
Wyndham traffic, glider Yankee Sierra turning left
south of
downwind
the
27
line,
turf Wyndham.
just, like that air.
Here's down and locked. Airspeed.
All right. So that is all I had prepared for today. I wish I'd had more. I actually tried to find um, some SkySight imagery. I had never screenshot and saved it, but it just makes it extremely clear. It has a convergence function um, feature on SkySight, and you can just see on any given soaring day, it's very obvious whether or not SkySight thinks there will be a Seabreeze front, and it's generally pretty accurate. If it says it's there, then it's worth fooling around in it. If you get a chance, ask Lee about any stories like heroic flights with along a Seabreeze convergence. I haven't actually made any that are particularly far venturing too far along it, but I just wanted to give you guys sort of like an exposure to it because it is a thing. It provides energy. It can also provide a sort of a shutdown of the soaring day if one of those fronts just passes over and proceeds north farther than Wyndham. Um, so hopefully that was of some use. And I guess if anybody has any questions, now would be a good time.
What do you look for in a forecast that will tell you that that's going to happen? You're going to get a good day for that.
Yeah, it's like almost any summer day with good post frontal lift, like um, almost any strong high cloud base day. Oh, you know what Lee says? He's like, oh, it really works best if there is a if there's not like just light to no winds forecast or maybe slight southerlies. He's like, after a cold front comes through and there's at least like 10 knots of northwesterly wind, he says that really helps um, cause a collision with some energy with sea breeze marching in from the south. So a good soaring day, post frontal, lots of lift, um, and then ideally a northwest breeze. So that's how Lee used to tell me, like the stronger the northwest breeze is, with a sea breeze coming in, the better that convergence line will be. Um, and of course, like I said, I'm sort of sold on SkySight.
Bill, maybe you said this, like my Zoom crashed, so I missed out some stuff, but does the sea breeze front tend to migrate inward generally during the day, or does it just depend on the
Oh
strength
yeah,
of the fronts and the sea breeze? Yeah.
yeah. Let me see. I could go by here for a second. Let's just do this. So I'm just going to show you this again real quick. So it's really hard to see, but there's sort of an arc of clouds here. Is
Yeah.
my hopefully my oh yeah my mouse comes through. So this was
Yeah.
kind of like the location of the sea breeze front. I don't know what time of day it was that Lee and I lifted off, probably around noon or 12:30. I don't know, maybe it was 1 p.m., but that's kind of where it was. Now if I click to this one, um, much later in the day, it's it's now it's like it's going from good speed to spruce to TF green and even like this whole greenish area devoid of clouds. Basically, the sea breeze has already moved through that and brought in the stable marine air. And the first edge of clouds is probably where the residual front is. And at this time of day, it's probably quite weak.
So if you have a north or northwest wind, what tells you that you have a front coming off the water? Like what's going to determine, like, is there a forecast where it says
Yeah.
there's
So
wind blowing from the south and from the north, or is it just
yeah,
basically
what you can
northwest?
do, like if you literally like a pretty easy way to prove it is if you just go to Groton's ASOS, call their AWOS phone number or tune in their ATIS. If they have a southwest wind or south wind, and then like Bradley has like a northwest wind, then there's definitely a sea breeze front forming somewhere. But I've gotten lazy. I just use SkySight. I click on the convergence feature, and it draws a color coded right over the map. It'll draw color codes of upward moving air because of two colliding air masses. So it will like on a day like this, it probably would have a strip of orange, moving left, lower left to upper right, in the position of this. And again with SkySight, you can click on the day and it'll just advance that feature. I could actually try it real quick just in case. Let me just see if by any chance.
So is it real time, or can you predetermine like tomorrow it's going to happen, or do you
Yeah.
got to wait and
So
you're
I
doing
can't.
real time, or you're doing like forecast?
Oh, for me, it's forecast, but many times you can literally just show up at the field and you can look south and you'll see a row of clouds. Um, this is actually showing convergence and it's claiming that there's some sinking and rising air patterns, but it's very, it's not really, actually Friday there might be, well, it's funny, it's here you go. So because Friday there's high pressure, there's going to be cold frontal passage. Literally, let's set this back to 10 a.m. So if I just march through the day here on SkySight, I have the convergence feature lit up. Then if we just advance here, you'll see that there is a weak sea breeze front, only 40 feet per minute of up or something by 2 p.m. And oh, generally, yeah, there's often a really strong one on Long Island for the same, yeah, reason. You get heating air, but you can literally like imagine I was doing this the night before, a July day or something. I'd be clicking on this, watching this pattern advance, and instead of these greens, they would be like reds and purples from the graph, the key on the right. And so, and if they were like this, and you can kind of see even on a crappy day, it does migrate. And again, this is mid to late winter, but basically it forms at a certain time of day and then it slightly marches north. You can see over in the New York City area, it's marching a little more. Actually, that's like Bridgeport, but Stanford.
So is the blue color sync or
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Which would be divergence, like it's claiming that there's like weak separation of winds, kind of like um, causing downward air to fill in slightly. But actually, like if you zoom in here, you can see what I'm talking about. Like these wind barbs are saying light southerly winds. They're pointing upward. And then you can see everything above this line
Mm.
is downward facing wind barbs, and that's exactly what convergence is. And the sea breeze, because there's a little bit of instability in Friday's air, landmass heating and stuff after the front, there's a slight northwest wind, and then there's just enough energy to bring in a sea breeze and cause this phenomenon. And then if you look right in the region of the convergence, the wind barbs go away because that's the colliding air, and they kind of cancel each other out in that region. So this is the tool I use. I just don't have a really strong day to give you an example.
Hmm.
Pretty light.
What about the timing, Bill? I mean, is it kind of dependent on typical thermal trigger timing, late morning to early afternoon?
Yeah, I think so. I think for there to be a sea breeze, there has to be air wanting to fill in the rising air being lifted off the ground, due to heating inland. So I think it's I think we've seen, like, I think on the day that I showed with me and Lee, we saw that line of clouds by like 11 a.m. On the shoreline, uh, and it's it's a dynamic situation. So it's like you can't. There's not necessarily any real rules of thumb other than on a day like that, the clouds will form. They'll start marching north, and then depending on whether it was a strong northwesterly day with some real instability, really bringing an air mass from the northwest, and then but it's there's so much rising air over the land that it's dragging air in from the south at that boundary, and so it's really going to depend on the strength of those two air masses and the day, and so I haven't really tried to predict it other than, good soaring day, northwest winds, clear blue skies, lots of lift inland. Seems like it's going to cause, we've all gone to the beach on a summer day, and by the mid-afternoon, you get that strong onshore wind in your face, um, just dragging that air in to fill in the air being lifted inland. Um, so. So I'm a little bit early. I didn't have a ton to prepare. Um, so I hope that's of some use to you guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I love that picture.
Yeah, I had texted this to Lee. He's like, wow, where was that? That's such a great example. Yeah, it's on my way to work or from work. Yeah.
Excellent. Good job, Bill.
Yeah,
Yeah, nice.
Bill, I thought it was great.
Cool. Yeah, it's just I didn't know much about convergence. Let me hit pause, stop recording.
So you've just been doing this for a couple of years, 3, 4 years?